I am not a woman of many words. I was once talkative, I think, before life pressed its thumb into me and smoothed out whatever laughter used to wrinkle my face. Now I speak slowly, carefully, as though every word might bruise. People say time heals everything, but they do not understand that some wounds live inside time, feeding on it, like roots that grow deeper the longer they're left alone. My name is Mira, and this is the story of my husband and my son, one who gave life twice, and one who decided once was enough. When I first met Rajiv, he was a quiet man with eyes that saw more than they said. He worked in a modest government office, kept his shirt neatly ironed, his shoes polished, and his smile reserved. I fell for the steadiness in him, the calm certainty that he could hold the world without letting it spill. When we married, it wasn't the kind of love that makes you dizzy. It was the kind that makes you safe. And I needed that. We built our small life brick by brick, an old rented house, a shared scooter, and tea in chipped cups every evening. When our son Oriv was born, Rajiv held him as if the child were light itself. I remember how he looked down at that tiny face, the way his eyes softened until I almost didn't recognize him. "He has your nose," he said, though he clearly had his. From that day, Rajiv's life became a routine of quiet devotion, coming home early to rock Oriv to sleep, saving extra money for his school fund, skipping new clothes for himself to buy storybooks for his boy. I watched them together sometimes and felt invisible, but in a good way, as if I had built a home where they could both belong. Oriv was a bright child, too bright, perhaps. He learned to read before school began, asked questions I couldn't answer, and carried an air of impatience with the world. Rajiv adored him but was often shy in his affection, showing love through acts, never speeches. He'd stay up fixing Oriv's broken toy cars, help him with math, or just sit quietly nearby when our son studied. Oriv, on the other hand, spoke of dreams far beyond our small world. He wanted a big life, he said, something that would make people remember his name. When Oriv turned 15, his body began to betray him. It started with fatigue, then nausea, then the fainting. The doctors took weeks before giving it a name: chronic kidney failure. I still remember that word, failure. It sounded like blame, as if something in us had failed him. The doctor said he would need dialysis, perhaps a transplant, if we wanted him to live a normal life. Rajiv didn't speak that day. He only held Oriv's hand and looked at me with eyes that said, "We will do whatever it takes." Dialysis changed our world. The hospital became our second home, the smell of antiseptic and faint decay clinging to our clothes. Rajiv took extra shifts, sold his scooter, and refused to let me pawn my jewelry. "It's my responsibility," he said quietly when I protested. "He's my son." I saw him shrinking, not in height, but in spirit. He smiled less, spoke less, but every morning, he kissed Oriv's forehead as though that act alone could keep him alive. When the doctors suggested a transplant, Rajiv didn't hesitate. "Test me first," he said before the words had even finished leaving the doctor's mouth. I remember trying to speak, trying to ask what about his health, his risks, but he silenced me with a look I'll never forget. It wasn't pride or bravado. It was love, absolute and pure. The tests came back. Rajiv was a perfect match. The surgery date was fixed. Oriv was scared, I could see it, but Rajiv only smiled and said, "You'll be fine, son. You'll be stronger than me." The day of the transplant, I sat outside the operation theater for 7 hours. 7 hours of praying, pacing, and whispering bargains to a God who had grown distant. When they finally wheeled them both out, pale but breathing, I collapsed into a nurse's arms. Rajiv had given away a part of himself, and yet, when he woke, he asked only one thing: "How is Oriv?" Not how he was. Not the pain. Only that. The doctor smiled and said, "Your son's new kidney is working beautifully." Rajiv closed his eyes, whispered a thank you, and smiled the faintest smile I had ever seen. Oriv recovered slowly, but he recovered. His cheeks filled again, his voice grew stronger, his laughter returned like sunlight through clouds. Rajiv, on the other hand, became thinner, weaker, though he never complained. Just side effects, he said when I worried. My body is learning to live with less. He went back to work within a month, limping slightly, pretending everything was normal. Oriv thanked him often at first, awkwardly but sincerely. I owe you everything, Papa, he said once, hugging him. Rajiv laughed and replied, you owe me nothing. Just live well. The years passed. Oriv went to college on scholarship engineering, like he always dreamed. He started staying in the city, calling less frequently. Rajiv missed him terribly but never showed it. He'd ask casually if Oriv had called, pretending it didn't matter when the answer was no. I would sometimes call our son and remind him. Your father doesn't say it, but he waits for you. Oriv would sigh and say, Ma, I'm busy. Tell Papa I'll call this weekend. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. Then came the job, his first job, in a big company, in a glass building that looked nothing like the world we came from. He sent us photos, him in a suit, in front of his desk, with friends who smiled like magazine people. I was proud, truly, but Rajiv just stared at the picture for a long time. He's growing away from us, he said softly. I told him not to think like that, but I saw it too, the widening gap between who Oriv had been and who he was becoming. Money began to flow in, and with it, distance. Oriv moved into a better flat, stopped coming home for festivals, and when he did, he seemed restless, out of place. Our home was too small, he said once. Rajiv smiled, though I saw the hurt in his eyes. It's small, yes, he replied, but it's where your life began. Oriv just shrugged, scrolling through his phone. That night, Rajiv went to bed early and didn't speak for a long time. Later, I found him sitting awake, staring at the ceiling. Maybe this is what we wanted, for him to have a better life, he whispered. But his voice trembled. The calls stopped altogether after Oriv got married. We weren't even properly invited. He told us about it a week before, saying it was a small ceremony for close friends. Rajiv and I sat in silence for hours after that call. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could forget the man who'd given him his own body. But Rajiv only said, maybe he's embarrassed. Maybe he thinks we won't fit in. That night, he pulled out his old shirt, the one Oriv had gifted him years ago, and folded it carefully, like a ritual of remembering months past with no word. When I finally called, a woman answered. Who is this? She asked sharply. I'm Oriv's mother, I said, my throat dry. There was a pause. Then a short, cold reply, he's busy. I wanted to say I just wanted to hear his voice, but the line had already gone dead. Rajiv never asked about it again. He began to carry a silence around him like a shadow. Then, one afternoon, Oriv came home. It had been nearly 2 years. He looked different, sharper, richer, like someone from another world. Rajiv was in the garden, watering the plants. When he saw Oriv, he froze, then smiled with such joy that I felt my chest ache. But Oriv didn't hug him. He nodded, said, "Hi, Papa," and went inside. That night, over dinner, he spoke mostly to me about work, business, investments. Rajiv listened quietly, adding a word here and there, trying to bridge a gap that had already become a canyon. After dinner, Rajiv brought out an old photo album. "Do you remember this?" he asked, showing Oriv a picture of his hospital recovery. Oriv barely glanced. "Oh, that," he said, almost dismissively. "That was ages ago." I saw Rajiv's hand tremble as he closed the album. "Ages ago," he repeated softly. Oriv didn't notice. He was already checking his phone again when Oriv left the next morning. Rajiv walked him to the gate. I watched from the window. They stood there for a long time, talking quietly. Later, Rajiv came inside and sat down heavily. He didn't remember, he said finally. "Didn't remember what?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes wet. He didn't remember the date of his transplant. He said he thought it was when he was 12, not 15. He said he's not sure it was even me who donated, it could have been a donor. My hands went cold. He said that. Rajiv nodded. He laughed about it. Said, "Papa, you're making it sound like a movie." That night, Rajiv cried for the first time in years. Not loudly, not with anger, just quiet tears that soaked his pillow. I sat beside him, helpless. "He doesn't mean it," I said, but the words tasted like lies. Rajiv whispered, "I gave him my blood, Meera. My blood. And he acts like I'm a stranger." I wanted to tell him that children forget, that the world changes them, but I couldn't. Because some things should never be forgotten. After that, Rajiv stopped talking about Oriv. He stopped mentioning his name altogether. He went to work, came home, and sat in the garden every evening, staring at the gate as though hoping for someone who would never arrive. I tried calling Oriv again, but his number changed. I sent him letters that went unanswered. Sometimes, I would scroll through social media and see pictures of him and his wife at parties, on trips, smiling as though we had never existed. The day Rajiv collapsed, I knew something had been breaking for a long time. The doctor said it was his heart, but I think it was his soul. As they wheeled him into the emergency room, I held his hand. His lips moved faintly. Tell him I still love him," he whispered. Those were his last words. He died without ever hearing from Oriv again. And I, the mother who watched one man give his life so another could live, stood between them like a ghost of everything they used to be. The funeral was small, quiet, and soaked in rain. The sky wept when I couldn't. Only a few neighbors came, whispering words meant to comfort, but comfort is a foreign language to grief. Oriv did not come. I called him, again and again, but his number went straight to voicemail. I sent a message that said, "Your father is gone." He didn't reply. The priest's voice droned over the sound of thunder, and I stood there watching the flames consume the man who had once given everything, even the organ that beat beneath another man's skin. I thought, how strange, that the heart that loved him still beats in the son who forgot him. When the ceremony ended, I took Rajiv's ashes home and placed them on the shelf beside his old spectacles. The house felt unbearably still. The silence had a shape, it pressed against me like another body. That night, I sat in the dark and whispered to his photograph, "He'll come, Rajiv. One day, he'll come." But the photograph only stared back with the same patient sadness he carried in life. I lit a candle beside it, though the flame trembled as if even it doubted my words. Days turned into weeks. I waited for Oriv's call. Each time the phone rang, I jumped, only to hear wrong voices, bank agents, wrong numbers, distant relatives. Once, I almost yelled at a telemarketer because her tone sounded too cheerful for a world that had lost Rajiv. I began to lose my grip on time. Mornings bled into nights, food lost its taste. I started talking to Rajiv's chair as though he still sat there. "He must be busy," I said aloud once, pouring tea into an empty cup. I waited for an answer that didn't come. A month after the funeral, I received a parcel addressed to Oriv. It had been mailed to our old home. Inside was a watch, one Rajiv had bought for him years ago, engraved with his initials. I recognized it immediately. My hands shook as I opened it. The clasp was broken. There was no note, only silence wrapped in betrayal. I understood what it meant. Oriv didn't want reminders. He was returning pieces of his past, like a man clearing clutter from a life he no longer claimed. I decided to go to him. I told myself it was only to deliver Rajiv's ashes, to let our son at least perform one duty as a son, but deep down, I wanted to see his face when he realized what he'd lost. I traveled to the city by train, carrying the urn in a cloth bag. Every sound of the wheels against the track echoed like a heartbeat, steady and painful. I imagined his face lighting up in surprise, then guilt melting into tears. I imagined him saying sorry. I lived that fantasy for 7 hours. When I reached his apartment building, I felt small. The building rose like a glass mountain, guarded by men in uniforms who looked at me with polite suspicion. "Whom do you want to meet, madam?" one asked. "Oriv Mehta," I said, my voice trembling. He checked a list. "Do you have an appointment?" Appointment. The word hit me like an insult. I was his mother, not a client. "Tell him his mother is here," I said. The guard spoke into his phone, waited, then looked up. "Sir says he doesn't know anyone by that name." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "Maybe you called the wrong person," I said quickly. "My son. Oriv Mehta. Flat 803. The guard frowned, checked again, then shook his head. "Sir said no mother." "Maybe you have the wrong building." I felt my knees weaken. "No," I whispered. "He lives here. He's my son. Please call him again." The guard hesitated but finally called. I watched his expression change from annoyance to discomfort. He said gently, "He says you must be mistaken. He doesn't know any Mira or Rajiv." And that was the moment something inside me shattered beyond repair. I walked away in a daze, clutching the urn. My feet barely touched the ground. The city blurred, cars, voices, the smell of exhaust, all of it distant and meaningless. I found a bench near the park and sat down, staring at the grey sky. Rajiv's ashes felt heavier than they should have. I wanted to scream his name, to make the world stop and listen to what he had done, but no one would have cared. The world is too busy to honor love that doesn't make headlines. That night, I stayed in a cheap lodge. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rajiv's face, the softness of his smile, the quiet hope that his son would remember him. I whispered to the dark, "He doesn't know you're gone, Rajiv. He says he doesn't know me." The room seemed to shrink around me. I held the urn close and cried into it, my tears mixing with the ashes. Maybe that's all grief is, love that has nowhere left to go. The next morning, I went back. I couldn't accept it. I waited outside the building, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Hours passed before I saw him step out, tall, well-dressed, his hair perfectly styled. My heart leapt. I called his name. "Oriv." He turned. For a moment, I saw confusion flicker across his face. Then recognition. Then something colder. "Ma," I whispered, moving toward him. He took a step back. "I think you're mistaken," he said quietly. His wife appeared beside him, slipping her arm through his. "Who is this?" she asked. "No one," he replied, without looking at me. That word, "no one," echoed inside me. I stood there, the morning light burning my eyes. "Oriv, it's me," I said, my voice breaking. "Your mother. Rajiv's wife. He's gone, Beta. He's gone." Oriv looked around nervously, as though afraid of being seen. "Please, don't make a scene," he whispered. "I don't know what you're talking about." His wife pulled him toward the car. "Let's go," she said sharply. I reached out, grabbed his arm. "You carry his kidney inside you," I cried. His face hardened. "That's ridiculous," he said flatly. "I had a donor, not a, whatever you're saying." He pulled away, got into the car, and drove off. I stood there, watching the red taillights disappear like fading hope. People were staring. I didn't care. My body felt drained, hollowed out. The city hummed around me, indifferent. I sank to my knees on the pavement, clutching the urn to my chest. "He's right here," I whispered to no one. "Your father is right here, beating inside you. And you don't even know it." After that day, I stopped trying to reach him. Something inside me went quiet. I returned home, carrying Rajiv's ashes, and placed them on the mantel again. The house seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something that would never come. I began to live like a ghost, moving through the rooms without sound. I still cooked for two, though one plate always went untouched. Sometimes I caught myself speaking aloud, "Rajiv, should I water the plants now?" And then remembering there was no one left to answer. One evening, a neighbor brought me an old envelope that had been delivered to their house by mistake. It was from Oriv's company, some kind of corporate invitation. My hands trembled as I opened it, though I knew he hadn't sent it himself. Inside was a glossy brochure announcing his promotion to regional head. His photo smiled up at me, confident, proud, unburdened. I stared at it for a long time before tearing it into pieces. "You can't rise high," I whispered, "not when your roots are buried in forgetfulness." Months turned into a year. My hair went white, my body frail. Sometimes I imagined Rajiv sitting beside me, his voice soft. "Forgive him, Meera," he'd say. "He's lost, that's all." But I couldn't. Forgiveness requires understanding, and I could not understand how a man could deny the blood that kept him alive. I went through old letters, his school reports, the photo of Rajiv in his hospital gown smiling weakly after surgery. I placed them all in a box labeled proof of love. I told myself I would give it to Oriv one day when he remembered. Then one morning, I received a call from an unknown number. A woman's voice, polite and rehearsed. "Mrs. Meera Mehta?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is from Central Hospital. Your son, Mr. Oriv Mehta, has been admitted. He requested no one." The last words hit like a blade. "What happened?" I asked, heart pounding. "Routine checkup," she said. "But his condition is delicate. We thought family should know." Family. The word had become a ghost in my life. Still, I went. When I reached the hospital, I hesitated outside his room. He looked pale, thinner than before. Tubes ran into his arm, machines beeped softly. For a moment, he looked like the 15-year-old boy lying after his transplant. I stepped inside quietly. He opened his eyes, saw me, and froze. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered hoarsely. "I came because you're sick," I said gently. "Your father would have come too." He turned his face away. "Stop saying that. His voice broke. "He's not real." I sat beside him. "Not real?" I repeated softly. "Then whose kidney beats in you, Oriv? Whose life keeps you breathing now?" He didn't answer. His eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. "It's easier this way," he muttered. "People don't understand. My colleagues, my wife, they think I came from nothing. They wouldn't respect me if they knew." He trailed off. I realized then that shame, not hate, had built the wall between us. Shame of where he came from. Of who we were. Of love that wasn't glamorous enough to survive his new world. I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away this time. "Your father was a good man," I said. "He never wanted anything from you. Not gratitude, not fame. Only that you live. He died still loving you." Oriv's shoulders trembled. "Stop," he whispered, covering his face. "I can't." "You can," I said firmly. "Because you carry him inside you. Every heartbeat, every breath, it's him." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then he began to sob, quietly, like a child again. I held him the way I had when he was small, stroking his hair, feeling the pulse beneath my hand, the same pulse Rajiv once gave him. When he finally looked up, his eyes were swollen. "Is it too late?" he asked. I smiled sadly. "For what?" "To remember him," he whispered. I shook my head. "Memory is the only thing that never truly dies." I left him sleeping after that, the machines beeping softly beside him. Outside, I looked at the sunrise through the hospital window, gentle, forgiving, almost like Rajiv's eyes. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because somewhere, deep inside that hospital room, Rajiv's heartbeat still lived, stubborn and tender, Inside the man who had finally remembered he was his father's son. When I returned home from the hospital that morning, the house no longer felt as empty. The silence had changed its shape. It was softer now, less cruel. I moved slowly through each room, touching the furniture as though greeting old friends. Rajiv's spectacles still lay on the table beside his urn. He cried. "Rajiv," I whispered. He finally cried. The wind outside stirred the curtains as if in response, and I imagined for a moment that it was his way of smiling. Over the next few weeks, Oriv began calling me. At first, the calls were brief, formal, filled with awkward pauses. "How are you feeling?" I'd ask. "Better," he'd reply. Then silence. But slowly, the silence grew into words. He started asking about Rajiv, his favorite food, the books he read, the things he used to say. Each question was a needle stitching something broken inside both of us. He liked gardening, I told him once. He said plants never forget who watered them. Oriv was quiet for a long time after that. Then he whispered, "I think I forgot too many things." One evening, he came home. Not to the city he had built, but to the small, worn house that had once been the center of our world. He came alone, carrying a small bag and flowers in his hands. When I opened the door, I saw the same boy I once held after his fevers, though older, weighed down by invisible guilt. "Ma," he said softly, "can I come in?" My heart clenched, but I stepped aside. "It's your home, Beta," I said. "It always was." He walked through the room slowly, as if touching time itself. His fingers brushed the walls, the shelves, the framed photographs. When he saw Rajiv's urn, he stopped. "I don't deserve to stand here," he whispered. "You do," I said quietly. "You're still his son." Oriv knelt before the urn and bowed his head. For the first time, I saw him cry without restraint. His shoulders shook, and between sobs he whispered, "I'm sorry, Papa. I'm so sorry." I didn't move. I just watched, because some apologies are meant for the soul, not for ears. After a while, he asked me to tell him everything, every detail of the day Rajiv gave him his kidney, the days in the hospital, the way he smiled afterward. I spoke for hours, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry the truth. He listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on the urn as though Rajiv might emerge from it at any moment. When I finished, he said, "He must have been in so much pain." I shook my head. He said the pain was worth it, because it meant you'd live. Oriv pressed his palms together and whispered, "Then I wasted the life he gave me." 4 days after that, he stayed with me. He cleaned the garden, repaired the gate, painted the old balcony where Rajiv used to sit. He cooked dinner once, though he burned the rice and laughed for the first time in years. "Papa would have scolded me for this," he said, smiling through tears. "He'd have eaten it anyway," I replied. That night, we sat in the dim light, talking about the past as if trying to rebuild it from memory. For the first time, I didn't feel like a widow or a mother abandoned. I felt like the keeper of something sacred, something finally being honored again. But memory is never gentle for long. Oriv's health began to falter again. His body had carried too much guilt, too much denial. The doctors said his remaining kidney was weak, his system strained. "You'll need treatment again," they told him. "Maybe even another transplant." He looked at me after the appointment, eyes tired but calm. "I won't run this time," he said. "I'll face it." I nodded, though fear coiled quietly in my chest. I had already lost one half of my heart. I wasn't sure I could lose the other. He began spending more time with me after that, as if trying to make up for every lost year. We walked to the temple together, cooked simple meals, shared quiet evenings. He asked about my childhood, about how I'd met his father, about the things we'd dreamed of before life turned into survival. I told him everything. Sometimes he would listen with his head resting on my lap, like he used to when he was little. And every time his heartbeat pulsed against me, I felt Rajiv's presence there too, steady, forgiving, eternal. One night, he asked, "Do you think Papa forgives me?" I smiled sadly. "He forgave you long before you needed it." Oriv frowned. "But how can you be sure?" "Because he was your father," I said. "And fathers love without reason. Even when forgotten." Oriv didn't reply. He just held my hand tightly, as if afraid that if he let go, he might lose us both again. Winter came, and with it, silence. Oriv's health worsened. He tried to hide it, but I saw how pale he grew, how his hands trembled when he thought I wasn't watching. One evening, I found him in the garden, staring at the same patch of soil Rajiv had once tended. "Papa loved this plant," he murmured. "He said it would outlive us all." The plant had grown tall, its leaves green despite the cold. "Maybe he was right," I said softly. "Love leaves roots even when the branches die." As the days passed, Oriv grew weaker. The doctor suggested hospitalization, but he refused. "I want to be home," he said. "With you." With him. I couldn't argue. Every night, I sat beside his bed, humming the old lullaby I used to sing when he was a child. Sometimes he'd smile faintly, whispering, "I remember that." Other times, he'd just listen in silence, eyes closed, breathing shallow. I prayed to every god I knew, but prayers, I've learned, are sometimes echoes that return unanswered. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, he called me close. "Ma," he whispered, "I've written something for Papa." He handed me a folded sheet of paper. His handwriting was shaky, uneven. "Read it after," he said. "After what?" I asked, but he only smiled, a small, peaceful smile that looked too much like Rajiv's. That night, he fell asleep early. I sat by his side, holding his hand until the rhythm of his pulse grew faint. When I woke at dawn, his hand was still warm, but he was gone. The world didn't stop. Birds still sang, the milkman still called, the sun still rose. But inside the small house, time collapsed. I sat beside him for hours, my fingers tracing the face that had once belonged to both a boy and a man. "You found your way back," I whispered. "And now you've gone where he is." There were no tears left. Only stillness. I folded the sheet of paper he had given me and placed it on Rajiv's urn. Then I read it. The letter was short. "Papa, I carried your heart and didn't know it. I carried your kindness and pretended it was mine. I thought forgetting you would make me stronger, but it only made me hollow. If there's another world, I hope it's one where you can see I finally remembered. Every breath I took was borrowed from you. I'm giving it back now, with love, your son, Oriv." I pressed the letter to my chest and finally wept, not from loss this time, but from the terrible, beautiful weight of love fulfilled too late. Outside, the wind stirred the garden. I imagined father and son somewhere beyond sight, finally together, finally at peace. The candle near Rajiv's urn flickered once, then burned steady. I took it as a sign. After Oriv's funeral, I didn't keep his ashes in a separate urn. I mixed them gently with Rajiv's and buried them beneath the plant they both loved. "You gave him your life," I whispered to Rajiv. "And now he's given it back to you." The soil was damp beneath my hands, the scent of rain rising around me. I felt the earth close over them like an embrace, binding their stories into one heartbeat again. The house feels peaceful now. The air no longer aches. I still wake up early, make 2 cups of tea out of habit, and place one beside Rajiv's photo. I talk to them both as if they're in the next room. People think grief fades, but I've learned it only changes form. Mine has become gentler, a quiet companion that reminds me of what was once beautiful enough to break me. Sometimes, children from the neighborhood come to play in my yard. I tell them stories, not fairy tales, but real ones. I tell them about a father who gave his heart away, and a son who forgot it until it was too late. They listen wide-eyed, not understanding the depth yet. But someday, they will. Love, I tell them, is not measured by how loudly we declare it, but by how silently we endure it at a tea dusk. When the light turns golden and soft, I sit by the garden and watch the plants sway. I can almost hear Rajiv's voice in the rustle of leaves, and sometimes a faint echo of Oriv's laughter. Between them, I find my peace. I no longer ask why things happened as they did. The world is cruel, yes, but it is also tender in the way it lets memories bloom even from grief, and so, this is where I end my story, not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of grace. The man who gave his kidney to his son still lives, because love does not die with the body that carried it. The son who denied him found redemption not in words, but in remembrance. And I, the mother who watched it all, have learned that love and pain are made of the same fabric. You cannot have one without the other. When the wind passes through the garden at night, it sounds like two heartbeats in harmony, whispering to me, "We are home."